Jean Hansen and her husband, Steve, were celebrating their anniversary at a beautiful beach resort in St. Lucia. One morning, they decided to walk the resort's wellness trail, a 1-mile path with stations for exercises like pull-ups, a balance beam, and even an elevated rope bridge. At each station, they did the activity. Then they came to the rope bridge. Steve crossed it easily, but Jean, she hesitated. All I could see, she said, were big gaping holes on the sides, large enough to fit my entire leg through with one slip of the foot. Fear overcame her, and she backed off and walked away frustrated and disappointed in herself. The next day, she and Steve took a trip on a 24-foot sailboat. It was Jean's first time sailing, and she was thrilled and exhilarated, even when the boat was in choppy waters. Experienced sailors were in charge, but Jean knew this adventure was far more dangerous than the rope bridge she'd backed away from the day before. So the following morning, Jean and Steve took the wellness trail again, and this time she said, I didn't say anything. I just walked up the ladder and I went for it. I didn't stop to look at it and wonder how I was going to accomplish it. I just paused for a second on the platform, grabbed the rope, and started putting one foot in front of another. Before I knew it, I was across, feeling very victorious about myself. Most of us, if we're honest, think of risk as a negative situation we should avoid. But risk is a part of life, and it's a big part of faith. Not every risk is worth taking, but if you're too overwhelmed by fear to correctly assess a situation, you'll miss many opportunities for growth. Have you been playing it safe? Too safe? If forward is the direction you want to go, be prepared to take some faith-based risks. Being a follower of Christ in today's world is not safe, and it isn't intended to be. Think of the people in Scripture who took great risks. Moses wasn't playing it safe when he returned to Egypt to confront Pharaoh. Gideon wasn't playing it safe when he dismissed almost all of his army. David wasn't playing it safe when he strode up to Goliath. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't playing it safe when they refused to bow down to the image Nebuchadnezzar had erected in the Babylonian plains. Esther wasn't playing it safe when she put her life on the line to save her people, telling Mordecai, if I perish, I perish. And then Peter wasn't playing it safe either when he got out of the boat to walk across the water to Jesus. What I'm saying is, you can't play it safe. Not if you want to seize tomorrow and accomplish the dreams that God places in your heart. I'll be honest, left to myself, I probably would have erred too often on the side of safety and security. But there's a man in the Bible who inspires me to keep stepping out and taking risks with wholehearted confidence in the Lord. I'm convinced you'll be able to go forward, unafraid to take risks, if you can embody his spirit. That man is Caleb. Do you know him? In this message, I'm going to show you how this Old Testament hero left a legacy of courage for you, a powerful example of risk-taking, future-grabbing grace. In the book of Numbers, Moses sent 12 men, Joshua, Caleb, and 10 others, as an advance party to reconnoiter the Promised Land. These men left the safety of their encampment, forded the Jordan River, slipped into Canaan, and their mission was to make notes of the land, observe the enemy, study the fortifications, estimate the population, and bring back enough intelligence to aid Moses as he planned the coming invasion of the land God had promised to the Israelites. The Bible tells the story this way. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin. And they went up through the south and came to Hebron, and the descendants of Anak were there. The city of Hebron had been the ancestral home of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But now it was inhabited by an evil tribe of huge warriors known as the descendants of Anak. The sight of these warriors terrified these spies. And they quickly harvested some pomegranates and figs from the orchards of Canaan, and 2 of them lugged back an enormous cluster of grapes. carrying it on a pole between them. Imagine the excitement when the spies returned to Kadesh Barnea. Their mission had taken 40 days, and nobody knew if they had survived or perished. And day after day, sentries at Israel's parameters watched for them, and now they're back, all of them safe and sound. But as you know, they were not united. Most of them wanted to live in the safe zone. So let's take them and some other stories along the way, and let's talk about how to live in the safe zone. In professional football, NFL coaches study the smallest statistic to find every possible advantage. But according to authors John Tierney and research psychologist Roy Baumeister, many coaches make the same mistake week after week. It happens on fourth down and short situations, when their team only needs a yard or two to keep possession of the ball. 9 times out of 10, instead of the riskier decision to try to win by going for another score, the coach settles for trying not to lose, and he sends the kicker in, and they punt the ball to the other team. Now, statistics show that trying for the goal and the win is actually the better way. So why do coaches punt on fourth down? Well, Tierney and Baumeister concluded there's a factor involved. They call it the power of bad. Simply put, our brains are wired to give more importance to negative aspects than positive ones. So bad events influence our decision-making more than positive ones. That means that no matter how much we want to succeed, avoiding bad can easily become our primary goal. Back to the coach. He knows if he chooses the risky play and he fails, and the other team goes on to score, the fans and the press will be unforgiving. Sportscasters will denounce him as reckless, and they will use phrases like loss of momentum and the turning point in the game. If the team loses by a narrow margin, that failed fourth down attempt will be blamed for the loss, and it will be replayed endlessly afterwards. And that image of potential failure is hard to overcome. So the coach plays it safe. The fear of failure has lost many, many games. Have you ever heard of these names? Shammua, Shaphat, Eagle, Palti, Gadiel, Gadi, Amir, Sethur, Nabi, and Gul? I haven't heard of them before. Have you? No, because these are the names of the 10 spies who risked their lives in an espionage mission only to lose their heart and forget to trust in God, and they came back with a negative report. They discouraged, they disheartened the people of Israel. Those men made 3 terrible mistakes, and we can make these mistakes ourselves if we're not careful. They fell into 3 traps, and you and I have to avoid these at all costs. First of all, they maximized the opposition. Oh, how we'd love to do this. God wants you to go forward. He has adventures, challenges, and victories and meaningful tasks for you. And as you look at the bridge to your future, are you looking at the ropes or are you looking at the holes? In Numbers 13, the 10 spies magnified every threat they looked at. They looked at the bridge God had designed for the future, and they saw only the holes. The Bible says, the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it were men of great stature. There were giants of descendants of Anak who came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." Notice all the holes in the 10 unbelieving spies. Here's what they said. Number 1, we are not able to go against these people. Number 2, they are stronger than we are. Number 3, the land devours its inhabitants. Number 4, the men are of great stature. Number 5, the men are giants. Number 6, they are from Anak and the land of giants. Number 7, we are like grasshoppers in our eyes, and we are like grasshoppers in their eyes. If you propose to move forward in life, especially if you aspire to leadership, You're going to have to learn what it means to take risks, to live by faith. Even history's most celebrated leaders had to learn this lesson. There is risk in going forward. There is no traction without friction. At the beginning of the Civil War, no military career looked brighter than General George B. McClellan's. Some called him the Napoleon of the American Republic. Lincoln made him commander of the Army of the Potomac, and he later promoted him to be the first general-in-chief of the Union Army. McClellan cut a stunning figure on horseback. He looked like he'd been selected by central casting for the role. But he also regularly overestimated the size of the enemy, magnifying the threat. And the more daunting the enemy grew in his mind, the less confidence he showed in the field. He saw the holes instead of the ropes. Although he consistently organized and prepared, he rarely got around to fighting. When he did, his objective seemed to be avoiding a loss, not winning the battle. Lincoln finally wrote McClellan and said to him, "If you don't want to use the army, I would like to borrow it for a while." Remind you of the 10 spies? Whenever we compare ourselves to the opposition, instead of comparing the opposition to God, we can get into the state of fear. If that's a pattern in your life, the first step forward is to recognize it. One of the things we do when we refuse to risk, when we try to keep from losing instead of trying to win, is we maximize the opposition. Number 2, we minimize the opportunities. While the 10 spies maximized the opposition, they also minimized the incredible opportunity that God had given them. They only had a dim perception of what God had in store for them. They believed in their hearts that God was setting them up for destruction, and their unbelief was contagious. You can read it for yourself in Numbers chapter 14. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night, and all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" You see, their perception of God would be laughable if it weren't so tragic. After all the Lord had done for them, he had delivered them from slavery. He had parted the wide waters of the Red Sea. He'd accompanied them with cloud and fire. He'd given them his law. He'd given food and drink in the wilderness. He had promised to make them a great nation in a land flowing with milk and honey. And all they could do was quickly forget. When we forget all the blessings God has provided for us in the past, we're apt to minimize his ability to guide us in the future. We may even dread the future and where we think God is leading us. And so we're exactly where the devil wants us. He puts us in a place of avoiding risks and playing it safe. Oh, we of little faith. What I'm telling you is this: don't minimize the opportunities God has for you in the future. Don't put all your effort into avoiding loss or turn your face away from the future God has planned for you. Instead, go forward with confidence and courage and do the task God has set for you. Don't maximize the opposition. Don't minimize the opportunities, because if you do, you will jeopardize the objective. In their unbelief, men and women, the Israelites discarded the precious, powerful future that God had for them. Their act of defiant unbelief incurred a terrible penalty. First of all, the punishment for bringing back an evil report to the people of God was meted out in 2 severe sentences. First, the 10 men who gave the evil report were killed immediately by a plague. Numbers 14. Now the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all the congregation complain against him by bringing a bad report of the land, those very men who brought the evil report about the land, they died by the plague before the Lord. But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, remained alive of the men who went to spy out the land. Second, Not only did the men who brought the report die, but all the people who listened to the report, they were sentenced as well. Listen to Numbers 14, 29 and 30. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in the wilderness. All of you who were numbered according to your entire number from 20 years old and above, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun, you shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. How very sad. I mean, the blessing of God was just waiting to be poured upon his people, and it was forfeited by their unwillingness to risk obedience to his command. Let me ask you a question today. What is your Canaan? What does God want you to tackle? What does he want you to possess? What does he want you to accomplish for him? Unbelief forfeits your opportunities and jeopardizes your objective. So let's keep seizing the moments God provides for us with childlike wonder. If God said it, I believe it, and that settles it, and I'm going to do it. How to live life in the safe zone. So let's talk now about how to risk life in the faith zone. That brings us back to Caleb. He and Joshua represent the minority opinion among the spies. Caleb had pleaded with the people. He said, let us go up, let us take possession. We are well able to overcome it. Imagine Caleb's frustration when the whole nation shouted down his words. But God heard. And as the decades passed, one by one, the older Israelites passed away, and their bodies dotted the desert. Even the aged Moses ascended Mount Pisgah and died. Joshua and Caleb were the sole survivors of their generation. When the day came to lead Israel into the promised land, they were as young in spirit as 40 years before. Joshua succeeded Moses. He led the Israelites across the Jordan River into the land of Canaan. And as we read through the book of Joshua, we find conquest after conquest and allotment after allotment. And then we open our Bibles to Joshua chapter 14, and who should we meet again but my favorite man, Caleb. He made a trip to see his old friend and fellow spy Joshua, and this is what he said to him. He said, you know the word which the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me, the heart of the people, they made them to melt. But I followed the Lord my God. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. Now, friends, with the passing of years, Caleb's faith had grown. His mind was sharp. His spirit was strong. His enthusiasm was like a child's. The promise of God was still the obsession of his heart. I believe there are 4 reasons for this, and they help us understand what is involved in living a life of risk. If you don't get anything else out of what I'm saying today, get these 4 things, because these are the key to your living a life out of the safe zone. First of all, risk takers stay exuberant about their lives. The first reason has to do with Caleb's exuberance. He told Joshua, the Lord has kept me alive these 45 years, and ever since the Lord spoke this word to Moses, while Israel wandered in the wilderness, and now, listen to this, here I am this day, 85 years old, and I am as strong this day as I was on the day that Moses sent me. In other words, Caleb said, I'm 85, but I should be 40, because I have the same energy, the same enthusiasm, the same exuberance about life that I had 45 years ago. Psychologist K. Redfield Jamison wrote these words, exuberance carries us places we would not otherwise go, across the savannah, to the moon, into the imagination. By its pleasures, exuberance lures us from our common places and quieter moods, and after the victory, the harvest, the discovery of a new idea or an unfamiliar place. It gives ascendant reason to venture forth all over again. That's a description of Caleb, my friends, and I hope it's a description of you. It is very hard to go forward without the kind of joyful zest for life that Caleb had. That same joyful eagerness is available to you and to me. For me, you say? Yes, it is. You can't lose the wonder of the worshipful, promise-filled life Christ died to give you. You can ask God for joy. You can choose to be exuberant in life based on his promises. It's not a matter of conjuring up emotions. It's a matter of saying, Lord, with your help, I'm going to be like Joshua. I'm going to be like Caleb, not like the other 10 who came back from Canaan. So risk takers stay exuberant about their lives. Number 2, they stay excited about their futures. I was having a discussion with my wife, and we were both talking about how you should live as you get older. And we both agreed that the way you should live as you get older is the way you've lived all your life, always looking to the future, always planning on what's next. And don't get caught in a defeatist attitude which inhabits so many people as they grow older. Watch Caleb. Watch what he does. Caleb told Joshua, now therefore, give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke in that day. For you heard in that day how the Anakim were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I will be able to drive them out, as the Lord said. Now, I don't know if you get what's going on here, but Caleb has just walked up to his leader and asked for the toughest assignment in the settling of the land. When I read that, I felt like shouting, yes! At age 85, Caleb was ready to claim the hill country, to tame the land, provide a lasting inheritance for his children. There's something here I don't want you to miss. Early in this message, I told you about Hebron and that it was the ancestral home of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But now it was inhabited by an evil tribe of huge warriors known as the descendants of Anak. The sight of these warriors had terrified the 10 unfaithful spies. They were made to feel like grasshoppers compared to the enemy. This portion of territory was still not taken by Israel. It was unpossessed, unclaimed, and the giants had scared everybody away. Everybody except Caleb, who said in effect, I want that country as my inheritance. And I'm ready to take care of those daunting supervillains. Let me at them. No matter your age or your circumstance, no matter what hill you need to climb, that kind of enthusiasm is what carries you forward. Jessica Long was an orphan in Siberia as an infant, born with fibular hemiplegia. She didn't have fibulas, in other words, ankles or heels, or most of the bones in her feet. But after much prayer, a Christian couple from Baltimore, Maryland, Steve and Beth Long, adopted her when she was 13 months old. A few months later, Jessica's legs were amputated below the knees. Growing up, she couldn't do everything other children did, but she learned to swim without prosthetics in her grandparents' pool. At age 10, Jessica joined a swim team. At age 12, she won 3 gold medals in the 2004 Paralympic Games in Athens. And since then, she has competed in 3 more Paralympic Games, and her medal count is up to 13 gold, 6 silver, and 4 bronze. She's one of America's most decorated Olympians. She said, I was raised the right way, but I still had to come to Christ on my own. Eventually, I decided I wanted to give Jesus my whole heart, and it was the best decision I've ever made. And she has some advice for us. Believe you are capable of incredible things and that God has a plan for every individual. I want you to embrace who God made you to be. I now look at my legs and think of all the people I've been able to touch because God made me this way. Embrace who you are. Shine bright and never give up on your dreams. Jessica looks back with gratitude, but her focus is on the future. She said, I'm so excited for what's next. That's what she told a reporter. Someone has said, if you can get excited about the future, the past won't matter much. Even when the world is coming apart at the seams, when global panics and pandemics are the order of the day, when our economy is uncertain and our faith is under assault, even then, especially then, you need to look ahead to the next step that God has for you. Caleb didn't use his gray hair to beg off the heavy lifting. He asked for a worthy challenge because he had the wisdom to know that with a powerful quest comes a powerful reward. In other words, knock down a giant and you become a giant yourself. He still had a vision for the future, and because of that, he accomplished the greatest victory of his life when he was 85 years old. Risk takers stay exuberant about their lives. They stay excited about their futures, and they stay enthusiastic about their assignment. As you can see, Caleb was enthusiastic about his assignment. Joshua and the Israelites had not yet succeeded in driving the evil occupants out of the large sections of the promised land. The business was unfinished, but Joshua 15 verse 14 says, Caleb drove out the three sons of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the children of Anak. Caleb did exactly what he was told, and he did it immediately. He is one of those success stories whose secret isn't so secret. He just did it in the strength of the Lord. That's enthusiasm. Today, our ministries at Turning Point cover the globe because of the capabilities of worldwide broadcasting. Much of the technological credit goes to Sir Edward Appleton, whose scientific discoveries won him a Nobel Prize in 1947. When asked about the secret of his lasting accomplishments, he said, "It was enthusiasm. I rate enthusiasm even above professional skill." You know the word enthusiasm, made up of the Greek words for in and God. Enthusiasm, it was coined to describe the zeal of the early Christians. When we have the God of all energy within us, there's a surge of power that's like an atomic reaction in our hearts. Risk takers stay exuberant about their lives. They stay excited about their futures. They stay enthusiastic about their assignment, and they stay energized about their God. And that brings us back to the consummation of our story. Only the energy of God within us can keep us barreling forward into the remainder of God's will for our lives. The story of Caleb's life is told in just 30 verses in the Bible. But 6 times in those 30 verses, we are given the secret to his risk-filled, risk-taking life. I want to put these before you. I want you to see these. It is really stark. It is really overwhelmingly clear and very powerful. Just 30 verses. And in those verses, 6 times we are told Caleb's secret. And let me tell you something. When you find Caleb's secret, you will find the secret for your life. Here are these verses. But my servant Caleb has a different spirit in him, and he has followed me fully. They have not wholly followed me, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, the son of Nun, for they have wholly followed the Lord. Deuteronomy 1, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he shall see it, and to him and his children I am giving the land on which he walked, because he wholly followed the Lord. Joshua 14, I wholly followed the Lord my God. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And Joshua 14:14, Hebron therefore became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. Now, if you didn't pick up from my voice the key phrases in these verses, you're not listening. Caleb wholly followed. He wholly followed. He wholly followed his Lord. By the time he was 85, most of his generation had given up hope and died, but Caleb still had a bright fire burning in his heart. He still wanted to risk his life on the greatest possible task that God could give him. As I reflect on what it means to incorporate risk into our walk with God, I want to tell you a story about the church I serve, the Shadow Mountain Community Church. We're here in El Cajon, California. By 1990, I had been the pastor there for about 10 years. After almost 8 years of struggling, we were finally ready to move into our new worship center. And we knew we'd experience traumatic growth, and we were trying to prepare for it. One of the things on our minds was finances. We were concerned that our giving to worldwide missions would suffer if we didn't do something special. We wanted to increase that number, but we didn't know how to go about it. You see, at that time, in our church, when people gave to the offering, they had an envelope with 2 spaces on it. One space was for missions and one space is for the church budget. And people would usually come into the church and they would put all their money into the church budget, and then along the way, they would learn about the importance of missions and they would start allocating some of their funds to missions. Well, we knew if we moved into this new building, which was huge, we would grow. In fact, we did. We tripled our size in almost 3 years. And what our concern was that our regular budget would grow and missions would be left behind. So we had a business meeting to talk about it. I'll never forget it. During the meeting, someone suggested that we allocate 5% of our general budget to missions. And someone else stood up and said, we give 10% of our income to God. We ask people to tithe. Why should not the church tithe their income to missions? That seemed like a big risk. Our new building payments, our growing ministry, we're struggling to meet our financial obligations. How would we ever survive if we took 10% of our already not enough money and gave it away? And that's when I heard myself get up and say, what do you think God would do for us if we gave 20% of our budget to missions going forward? That was a long time ago. I'll tell you, I still remember how quiet it got that moment in that meeting. And it seemed like it stayed quiet for a long time. And then a man by the name of Ralph Radford, one of the Calebs of our church, he stood up and he encouraged us to take that challenge. He predicted that God would bless us if we did. And someone also reminded us that missions is the closest thing to the heart of God in the Bible. God had sent his own son into this world as the first missionary. We made the decision, that kind of risk decision, that decision not to keep from failing, but to actually go forward and win. I've been talking about that decision in this message. And we carried that out that day, and we have been doing it now for over 30 years. Today, Shadow Mountain currently supports 198 missionary families with ministries in 41 countries in over 50 different languages. We help to underwrite 3 pregnancy care centers, the Downtown Rescue Mission, the Servicemen Center, and our Spanish, Arabic, and Iranian congregations. Our missionary budget this year will exceed for the first time $4 million. And over the years, since we took that risk back in the early 90s, we have given over $50 million to evangelize the world. None of that is said to boast. I didn't tell you that so you could think how great this church is or how great its pastor is. No, it's thanksgiving, it's gratitude, but it's also a lesson for us. We made a decision to take a risk, and God honored that decision in a magnificent way. What risk is God asking you to take as you go forward? I want to tell you flat out, you can't go forward without risk. What God has done for us, he will do for you. His will for you is not earthly comfort, but divine courage. Courage in the face of opposition. Courage in the face of cultural change. Courage when confronted with the unknown. Courage in the midst of a pandemic. God will never choose safety for us if it will cost significance. God created us to count and not to be counted. This is your time to move forward. This is my time to move forward. Out of the safe zone, into the faith zone, and going forward. In 2 Samuel 7, David told the prophet Nathan, "See, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells inside tent curtains." So David grabbed hold of his dream and began moving forward to see its fulfillment. But David's idea to build a temple didn't just poof into his head like an exploding nebula. Oh no. It was rooted in the history of Israel. You see, centuries before, God told Abraham to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice and burnt offering on a distant mountain. And God was specific about the mountain. Not just any hilltop would do. No, it had to be Mount Moriah. 1,000 years later, when David and then Solomon planned to build the Jewish temple, they placed it on that very mountain, Mount Moriah. David's vision for the location of his temple had roots as deep as Genesis 22. It was grounded in the story of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his only begotten son as a burnt offering. And it's no coincidence that 1,000 years after David, Jesus Christ gave himself as an offering for sin on or near that very ridge. From Abraham and his son to David and his temple to Christ and his cross, everything was linked, and each event had its roots in the one that preceded it. You see, the best dreams don't start with us, but instead are planted in us by God. If it isn't rooted, it's rotten. We stand on the shoulders of others. We are links in a chain that we build on what others have done, even as future generations will build on the work that we have done. That's why it's all right to look around for ideas and see what other people are doing. We get ideas from history and from how others are inspired to act today. To develop your dream, think about your heritage, what you love to do, your life experiences. Think about your background. Everything in your life has prepared you for the next steps. So look at what's already happening in your life and in your church, and start where you are and work outward and forward. Root your dream in history. Second, reproduce your dream in a picture. As ideas and intentions begin to bubble up in your heart and mind, you need to figure out where to begin and how to implement your dream. So you have to nudge the abstract burden into a real-life plan. After all, for your vision to touch others, it must become as practical as Esther's dinner, David's slingshot, Gideon's torches, the boys' lunch of bread and fish, and the Good Samaritan's wine and oil, and Paul's pen. We never know how a single detail born from a visionary mind will be used by the Lord in helping us experience our dream. Let me tell you what I've learned. Visionaries have an uncanny ability to see their dreams and convey them in images. That's how David built the impetus needed for his temple project. As we have seen, David's dream began when he told the prophet Nathan, quote, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells inside tent curtains." The temple wasn't some abstract concept. No, it was a vision that filled David's mind in technicolor. He was able to convey that image to others and motivate them to action by drawing a contrast. Look at my palace with its paneled walls and glorious bulwarks. And look at that frayed tent called tabernacle. Shouldn't God's house be better than any home of yours or mine? You see, the ability to see what could be in the future is essential to straining forward toward the realization of your dream. I've been a pastor now for right at 50 years. I've been involved in 10 building programs in my career. And by God's grace, I've been able to see every one of those buildings in my mind before they showed up in the blueprints. I don't know how you can fulfill a vision unless you can see it in your prayers and in your dreams. Here's a good illustration. One day, Edwin Land was sightseeing in New Mexico. He had his 3-year-old granddaughter with him, and they were taking pictures of things that interested them. The little girl was impatient to see how the pictures turned out. She wanted to know why she couldn't see them right away. Land took a short walk in the desert and pondered that question, and by the time he returned, he had visualized a camera that would develop its negatives instantly. He saw the whole thing in his mind, and he went on to invent the Polaroid land camera, one of the most successful photographic products of the 20th century. Describing how he invented the camera, Land later said, "You always start with a fantasy. Part of the fantasy technique is to visualize something as perfect. Then, with the experiments, you work back from the fantasy to reality, hacking away at the components." You see, having a dream for tomorrow, men and women, isn't just a matter of feeling a generalized burden. It may start there with a yearning to feed the hungry or help the homeless or evangelize the world. But as your vision develops, it takes on distinct and detailed images. You can see yourself rolling up your sleeves and getting a grip on the very things needed to press forward with your dream. You can convey it to others in a way that excites them. Don't worry if you can't see the final fulfillment of your long-term dreams. We will walk through the practical steps toward reaching success in the time to come. But for now, what matters is being able to imagine your dream in a way that captivates both others and you. And then number 3, not only root your dream in history and reproduce your dream in a picture, reinforce your dream with determination. David discovered that every dream faces discouragements. I can give testimony to that. That's part of the process of proving its validity. David's dream for the temple excited him like nothing else in his whole life. He was fired up, ready to go, eager to lead the campaign to build. He could see it in his mind's eye every time he looked from his palace rooftop toward Mount Moriah. He was ready to see his dream accomplished. But then, if you know the story, the roof caved in. God told David he would not be allowed to build the temple because of his violent past. Here's what God said. "David, you shall not build a house for my name, because you have been a man of war and have shed blood. It is your son Solomon who shall build my house and my courts." You talk about the death of a vision. Oh, how many of my visions have died. And each time it feels like a small part of my heart dies with it. I have this little place near my house where I go and park my car and pout when a dream of mine doesn't pan out. I think through it, I surrender things back to God, and then I drive away looking forward through the windshield and not backward in the rearview mirror. But David didn't pout for long. I love this story. He told himself something like this: well, if I can't do it myself, and if God has appointed the task for my son Solomon, then I'll just do all I can to help him succeed. In refusing to give up on the project because he was taken out of the driver's seat, David illustrated a core value of dream building. No dream is ever realized without a huge measure of determination. If you're going to see your dream through, you have to be determined. Reminds me of a story of my oldest grandson, David Todd. One of our family Christmas traditions in the Jeremiah family is assembling jigsaw puzzles. This year, David Todd joined in, and he enjoyed it so much that he told his roommates about it when he got back to college. And they decided to tackle a puzzle together. To my amazement, they bought a 2,000-piece puzzle. I've never even thought of doing one of that many pieces. So what did he and his friends do? Determined to complete what they started, they took 10 days to finish the puzzle around their regular obligations. And then I got a phone call from a very frustrated David Todd. He said, "Poppy, our puzzle is done, but we can't find the last piece. There's one piece missing. One piece out of 2,000. So what did he do? They went back to the store. They bought the very same puzzle in another box. They used the box top as a guide, and they went through all 2,000 pieces of that other puzzle till they found the culprit. And with great satisfaction, they snapped that final piece into place. The completed puzzle now hangs on their wall, bearing the signatures of everyone who helped." I don't know if I would ever have had the determination to do that. I mean, the puzzle was just a fun project, a simple shared goal among a bunch of friends. But their determination to achieve that goal was real. The picture on the box top was both vision and guide, showing them their goal as well as the exact puzzle piece they needed to achieve it. God's vision is a guide for you to follow too. And when God places his dream in your heart, you become more determined and dedicated, and you press on to make sure the work is finished. So root your dream in history, reproduce it in a picture, reinforce it with determination. And number 4, reconcile your dream with its cost. As you build your vision, be willing to sacrifice. Let me tell you something that's without possibility of contradiction. Dreams are costly. Dreams are costly, as David found out when God led him to purchase some land for the temple at a high spot in the area. Here's the story. This place was owned by a guy named Araunah the Jebusite. He used to use the high location for its winds to thresh out his wheat. The chaff would blow away and the grains of wheat would collect, and then he would sell them. And as David approached Araunah for this valuable site, the most desirable location in Jerusalem, here's what happened. Because he was the venerable king of Israel, he could have seized the land. He could have just taken it. That may be why Araunah offered to donate to him. He said, King David, this is my land. You want to build something here? You can let me just give it to you. But David said in 2 Samuel 24:24, no. I will surely buy it from you for a price. For I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God with that which costs me nothing. Big dreams are expensive. If you've experienced a fulfilled dream, you know what I'm talking about. The cost comes in money, in energy, in criticism, in unbelief, in unplanned obstructions, in unfaithful helpers, and a multitude of other very discouraging things. I think Jesus was trying to help us with this. He said, for which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Or what king, going to make war against another king, does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Your dream may not involve building a tower or going to war. But hear me now, there's still a cost involved if you want to see it through. Not understanding that cost up front can cause you to give up on your dream when you hit the first hurdle. Dorothea Dix was a woman who understood the cost of a dream. She was born in Maine in 1802 and ran away from home at the age of 12 to escape her alcoholic family and abusive father. She lived with her grandmother in Boston, and by the age of 14, she was teaching in a school for girls. Eventually, she was asked to teach a Sunday school class of women in a prison, housing the insane and mentally disturbed, who at that time were jailed alongside criminals and treated like animals. Many of these souls were cold and naked and kept in darkness and chained to the walls and even flogged. Dorothea determined with all her heart to help these wretched castaways from society, and she devoted the rest of her life to a relentless vision for prison reform. She visited penitentiaries and filed reports. She testified before legislatures. She wrote articles. She gave speeches. She initiated reform. She visited hundreds of prisons and jails, and everywhere she went, she grappled with a level of suffering that made her sick. In her trademark bonnet and cashmere shawl, Dorothea logged more than 60,000 miles by train and carriage, testifying that God's providence was defining her path. Horace Mann said she had a divine magnetism. Dorothea was among the first American reformers to speak up for mentally ill children. And when her proposals were voted down in state legislatures, she just redoubled her efforts. Traveling abroad, she championed prison reform for the mentally disabled across Britain, throughout Europe. And when the Civil War broke out in America, she was named Chief of Army Nurses for the Union and wore herself out organizing medical care for wounded soldiers. When the war ended, she was 63 years old and weighed 95 pounds, but she was far from finished. Dorothea hit the road again on behalf of the mentally ill, spending another 15 years traveling between Maine and California, establishing ministries for society's forgotten victims. It would seem all my work is never to be done, she wrote, yet she kept on working. For the last 50 years of her life, Dorothea had no home. She simply lived in the quarters of the 123 asylums and hospitals that she founded. She passed away at the age of 85, and Matthew 25:35-36 was read at her funeral. Here's what that says. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Dorothea paid a huge price in pursuing her dream, but she also received a great reward, namely, improvements across the globe in the treatments of millions of people suffering from mental illness. The costs she paid for her efforts were real, but the benefits are still rippling throughout our world today. You have to reconcile your dreams with cost. If you're looking for a cheap, easy way to get where you want to go, just stop right now. There is no such thing. To realize your dream, if it's a God-given dream, there's a price to pay, but I promise you, it is a price worth paying. Finally, release your dream to your legacy. Looking back on this period of Israel's history, one thing jumps out at me, and here it is. This was David's dream, and it ended up being called Solomon's Temple. David's dream, Solomon's Temple. You see, David not only accepted that, he made that happen. It was his dream, all right, but when the dream was not going to be realized in his life, and God said, pass it on to your son, David refused to allow his dream to die when he died. And although he was not allowed to build the temple, the Lord gave him the construction details, which he passed on to his own son, Solomon. Here's what he said. Consider now, Solomon, for the Lord has chosen you to build a house for the sanctuary. Be strong and do it. Then David gave his son Solomon the plans for the vestibule, its houses, its treasuries, its upper chambers, its inner chambers, and the place of the mercy seat, and the plans for all that he had by the Spirit of the courts of the house of the Lord, of all the chambers all around, of the treasuries of the house of God, and of the treasuries for the dedicated things. You say, Pastor Jeremiah, what does that all mean? Well, the Holy Spirit had instructed David with the specific details of the temple, and David in turn passed them on to his son Solomon. I can imagine David transferring that information from God onto an architectural blueprint and laying it out before Solomon and saying, here it is, boy. God gave this to me, and this is what you're going to build. David had dreamed of building a permanent place where God could be worshiped. And he determined to leave something behind that would honor the Lord. It was his dream, and the resources he put in that place that allowed his son Solomon to move quickly toward the construction of the temple. And David's instructions to his son Solomon have been a charge to pastors and missionaries and Christian workers ever since. 1 Chronicles 28:20. Be strong and of a good courage, and do it. And do not fear nor be dismayed, for the Lord God, my God, will be with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you until you have finished all the work for the service of the house of the Lord. Friends, this story illustrates how it's possible to achieve something after your death that could not have been achieved during your life. Before he died, David decided to pass on something that would live on after him. From his life, we can learn the great importance of dreaming beyond the span of your years. How can God use us? What is something he could do through each of us after we're gone? Well, when I think of that question, I often think about this. I remember as a young man, when I turned 16, my parents gave me a copy of the Scofield Reference Bible. It was part of my spiritual education. I still have that Bible, and I cherish it. It was really the only reference Bible that there was back then that I know about. It was the standard reference Bible during my growing up years, even though it was copyrighted in 1909. Years after its inception, years after C.I. Scofield put that whole study Bible together, it was still helping people like me understand what the Bible says, what the Bible means, and what the Bible means for me. And I can only hope and pray that in some small way, the Jeremiah Study Bible, which was released in 2013, will have that same impact on some future student of the Scriptures. One Sunday afternoon in 1771, a man named Valentin Haüy ducked into a restaurant in Paris for dinner. He sat near the stage, and the show that evening featured blind people in a comedy routine. They were objects of ridicule and cruelty, and the act was designed to make fun of their blindness. Deeply offended, Haüy began to develop a burden for the blind. Sometime later, he spotted a sightless street urchin who was begging for coins outside a Parisian church. Giving the boy some money, Haüy was amazed to see the boy feel the raised markings on the coins and distinguish the amounts. That gave Haüy an idea. Why couldn't books be written with raised letters, like images on coins? Why couldn't people learn to read with their fingers? Haüy took the boy off the streets, offered him food and shelter, and devised a plan with wooden blocks and numbers, and taught the boy to read. In 1784, Haüy started the world's first school for blind children. It was in Paris, and one of the first teachers was the blind boy rescued from the streets. But that's just the beginning. Several years later, another boy named Louis was born in the village of Courbevoie, France. His father was a farmer and a harness maker, and as a toddler, Louis loved watching his father work with leather tools. But tragedy struck in 1812 when 3-year-old Louis began playing with a leftover strap of leather. Trying to punch holes in it, his hand slipped and the sharp tool punctured and put out his eye. An infection set in that spread to the other eye, and little Louis ended up blinded in both eyes for his whole life. A local minister named Jacques Poullaille loved the boy and began visiting him to read him the Bible. Seeing the boy had a good mind, Father Jacques determined he could receive an education. So at age 10, Louis was enrolled in the school Haüy had established in Paris, where he proved to be a brilliant student. Eventually, Louis began teaching other students in the Paris School for the Blind. He studied Haüy's method of reading. He also became aware of a system of military communication developed by a French army captain that allowed soldiers to communicate in the dark by running their fingers over a series of dots and dashes. Though still a teenager, Louis Braille began adopting these systems into a program of his own, and in 1829, at age 20, he published a little book on the Braille method of reading. The school resided in a damp building by the River Seine. It was cold and unhealthy, and the food and conditions were poor. Louis got tuberculosis, but he continued working on his system of reading, which began catching on and soon was being exported all over the world. As his health failed, Louis said, "I am convinced my mission on earth has been accomplished. I ask God to carry me away from this world." Now pause for just a moment with me and think of the chain reaction of that cascading dream. One man developed a burden for the blind when he saw ridiculed actors on stage and a beggar boy on the streets. His burden led him to establish a school and attempt a system of reading. Then a local pastor developed a burden for a blind boy in another village and taught him the Bible and longed to send him to school. And that blind child, Louis Braille, developed a burden to improve and expand Haüy's work. And the world was changed, and as a result, millions of sightless souls have experienced the joy of reading the Bible and other books for themselves, now for almost 2 centuries. We may never create a language for the blind or build a temple for the Lord, but please remember there are no small tasks in the Lord's work and no insignificant dreams. Our work is never routine. Our labor is never wasted, and our legacy is capable of outliving us. I've always loved radio. and everything about radio. From sitting next to the radio as a child with my ear to the speaker so I could listen to the Lone Ranger or the Shadow, to putting together night radio kits as a teenager, for reasons I can't explain, I have always loved radio, and radio has had a mysterious hold over me as far back as I can remember. When I became a student at Cedarville College in 1959, I was given the radio opportunity of a lifetime. A new Christian FM station was being launched in Springfield, Ohio, just 15 miles from my home. I don't remember how it happened, but I was able to audition for an on-air announcing position, and I got the job. Every day, Monday through Friday, I drove to Springfield to do the 3 to 11 shift on WEEC FM. I did the news, I hosted the call-in music shows, I queued up and played radio programs like Back to the Bible and Unshackled. When I was asked to help start a radio station on the campus of Cedarville College, I teamed up with Paul Gaffney, a college classmate, and my girlfriend and soon-to-be wife, Donna Thompson, and we launched WCDR-FM. This station had a humble beginning. It was a 12-watt transmitter on the third floor of the administration building, and we used to joke with each other that on a good day you could hear that station on the first floor. But in time, that station grew to a network of stations that literally covered the entire Miami Valley with great Christian music and the message of the gospel. I personally believe that God used WCDR to help grow Cedarville College. When I was a junior in college, God called me into the ministry. It was absolutely, definitely clear to me that I was to become a preacher of the gospel, so I immediately enrolled in Dallas Theological Seminary. Don and I got married right after graduation from college, and we headed off to Texas for 4 years of postgraduate learning. My greatest regret, if I could call it that, was this. I loved radio. I had spent most of my life involved with radio. Yet now it appeared God was leading me in a totally different direction in terms of my vocation and lifelong calling. Radio was put on hold for 4 years while I worked on my master's degree. But what happened after that is one of the most amazing stories of my life. After a short stint as a youth pastor in New Jersey and 12 years as a pastor of a startup church in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I accepted the call to Shadow Mountain Community Church in San Diego. And the next year, I began a local 5-day-a-week teaching program on a Christian station in San Diego, Salem Radio's KPRZ. The station manager, David Ruhlman, helped me get started in this new format, and the rest is history. Today, Turning Point hits the airwaves on more than 3,000 radio stations in the United States, and on many of those stations, the program is heard 2 or 3 times per day. Momento Decisivo, the Spanish edition of Turning Point, is heard in every country where Spanish is spoken. We broadcast more than 121,000 radio programs and 4,050 television programs outside the United States every year. So, you can see, God did not call me into the ministry to take my dream away. He called me into the ministry because my dream was way too small. He had a much better and a much bigger plan for my life. And as a result of those experiences, I've learned I can trust God with my dreams, even as I move forward toward His plans for my life. And I've told you all these stories and shared all of this gospel message from the Bible to tell you one thing. You can trust God with His vision for your life. You can be like Nehemiah, who said, God put it in my heart. And when God puts something in your heart and gives you a dream, never stop until you've realized it, and you will be the most blessed person on the face of God's green earth.